tonight, the deadly disease gripping the nation.
Type 2 diabetes isn't just a ticking time bomb, it's already exploding all around us, and that's got a huge impact for people, for families, for the health service. We've got to act now.
And the devastated families left in its wake.
The thought of being a widow at 50 doesn't really enter your head. You just think about life ahead and it's not what you plan, just because you didn't take it seriously in the beginning.
Good evening and welcome to the Tonight programme. It's one of the leading causes of blindness, strokes, kidney failure and amputations in Britain, and experts are warning it's now reaching crisis levels. Diabetes is nearly 3 times more common than all cancers combined, and we're all potentially at risk from getting type 2. Tonight, Jonathan Maitland investigates Britain's diabetes epidemic.
There's a silent killer in our midst, a disease we're all at risk of getting. Type 2 diabetes. Over 3 million of us already have it. The damage it does can stay hidden for years, and it costs the NHS billions.
We have to be concerned about the rise in type 2 diabetes because it's so massive. I mean, it's doubled over the last 15 years. It's now 10% of the NHS budget. We've got 3.8 million people with diabetes and 7 million people at high risk. It now touches every family in the United Kingdom and threatens to wreck the health service. We've got to take it seriously.
What's even more alarming, I think, is that right now, staggeringly, more than 500,000 of us are walking around with undiagnosed type 2 diabetes, which is roughly equivalent to 1 person on every full double-decker bus who's got it but doesn't know about it.
Hey, Dougie, nice. That's why Tonight has teamed up with Diabetes UK to give people free diabetes health checks. From bus drivers to shoppers to engineers, we'll assess them all to see if they're at risk of having type 2 diabetes now or in the future. It's an issue because the number being diagnosed with the disease is rising fast, and if we don't get a grip on it, it's reckoned 5.5 million people will have it in 10 years' time.
So weight stored around the waist, particularly for type 2 diabetes, is a risk factor. So your score today is 22 points. That's what we call moderate risk of developing type 2 diabetes.
So how do you know if you're at risk? Well, being overweight with a large waistline is one of the biggest indicators.
I had an idea that I was a little bit plump around the middle, but it is still quite a surprise.
I was measured around the belly button where I usually measured it slightly below. The trouser size I get is a size below, and it is quite loose on me. So I was a bit shocked by that.
As is ethnic background.
Members of the black population are higher risk. Yes, I'm aware.
You're also more likely to get type 2 diabetes if someone in your family has it.
My mother and also my father had a diabetes.
Age counts too, specifically being over 40, although increasing numbers of younger people are getting it.
There's a 1 in 50 chance you've got it now and a 1 in 10 chance you'll develop over the next 10 years.
We'll find out later how many of the people we assessed were at risk of getting diabetes. I think I might be one of them, so I'm getting checked as well.
I'm a little bit worried actually because I have a history of diabetes in my family.
What we'll be doing is to ask you a few questions and then take some measurements as well to be able to calculate your risk. Okay? So if I first ask you, where would you put your age group?
Tragically, I'm over 50.
You mentioned that you have a family history of diabetes. How close is it?
Interestingly, I think my mother may have had it undiagnosed.
Okay.
And my aunt definitely had it. I mean, she died with it, possibly of it.
Sad to hear that. We've gone through the risk factors that you can't do anything about, but we can now concentrate on the ones that you can do something about.
Is it measuring time?
Yes.
Okay.
So if I can get you to pop onto this for me.
I hate this bit.
Have your height.
If it was a speak your weight machine, it would say 1 at a time, please. It's funny, it's higher than where my belt is. People don't know where their waist is, do they, sometimes?
Normally, people would think where their jeans is, but it's a little higher than that.
Your waist is actually not where your belt is. But I tell you what, I can remember the days when I fitted into 32-inch waist jeans, but those days are long gone.
I will assume so, but it's something that you can work on now.
To calculate my risk, each of my measurements and the answers I gave earlier were given a score and then added up.
Okay, so that will fall within the moderate risk, which will suggest that you have 1 in 33 chances of having type 2 diabetes now, but also your chances of developing type 2 diabetes in the next 10 years is 1 in 7.
Which is quite high. So what are the factors that make me slightly more at risk than your average Joe Bloggs?
Okay, your waist gave you 6 marks, which will suggest that if you were able to lose a little bit of inches around your waist, it will reduce your risk. You can also see that the fact that you had a close family member with diabetes and the fact that you mentioned that you are 53 also pushes your risk up. So what I want you to do now is to be able to arrange to see your GP.
Okay, I will.
Okay.
But first, I wanted to know exactly what diabetes is. Most of us link it with eating too much sugary stuff, but I wanted GP and diabetes specialist Dr. Naresh Kanumili to give me a more detailed explanation. OK, Naresh, most of us, I think, are aware of diabetes, but there's a bit of confusion because we know that it's to do with being overweight and eating too much naughty food. But how does it work exactly?
Okay, you can see all the food there. All food contains sugar, or as we call it, glucose. Now, glucose is important as a form of energy for us to live and survive and everything. But in diabetes, unfortunately, the levels of glucose are just too high, and that can cause problems. So we enlisted some help for you to just show you how it works. The kids in red are your blood supply. The things they're carrying there, the cubes, are your glucose. The kids in blue are your cells, and the kids in green are insulin. So what happens normally is when the blood supply is going around with the cubes of glucose, they take them to the cells, and insulin unlocks the cell so the glucose can be delivered to the cells.
I get it. So this is how your body works normally.
Exactly.
When it's working in a streamlined, efficient way, that the really important sugar gets distributed all around the body with the help of insulin.
Exactly. So the cells use that glucose for energy for normal daily function. That's what happens in a normal person.
Start when the glucose kind of stays in the body and there's a build-up of it.
When you're diabetic, what happens is the glucose is going round and round the body, but unfortunately the insulin is either not enough or it's not very effective because of fat cells. So what happens now is the fat cells stop the insulin from unlocking the cell, and so glucose cannot be given to the cell to work efficiently.
The fat cells being these yellow T-shirts that are stopping things happening.
Exactly.
OK, so glucose is great when the body's working well and it's being distributed, but it's a bit of a disaster if it stays in the body in big deposits or it's not broken down properly.
Yeah, and if there's too much of it, it goes into the smaller blood vessels around your eye, leading to blindness, smaller blood vessels around your kidneys, causing kidney problems, and then also the major thing that really causes problems is it goes into the bigger blood vessels and causes heart disease. And last but not least, it affects the feet, and then that can lead on to nasty complications and people end up having amputations.
51-year-old Joseph Sharrock from Blackburn has had type 2 diabetes for 20 years. It meant his right leg had to be amputated below the knee 2 years ago. He's been fighting to save the other one ever since. Hello.
All right.
Sorry to disturb you. Jill, I'm Jonathan.
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Hello, Jill.
All right.
How are you doing, first of all?
Basically, I feel fine. Like I say, obviously, apart from all the complications I've got, but in myself, I feel fine.
Can you remember the moment when you were told that you'd have to lose your leg? Because I mean, it must be a tremendous shock.
I suppose deep down, I knew that it were coming. I think I was gobsmacked, to say the least. But afterwards, I just felt, well, life goes on.
What was it about your lifestyle, do you think, that contributed most to this happening?
I said basically me drinking. I used to go out every night playing darts. 8-9 pints would be nothing. I don't drink anymore. I didn't take good care of me insulin and me pills, what I was supposed to be taking.
Now, you've got issues with the other leg, but the good news is that it looks like this is going to be okay here, yeah?
Touch wood, that's going to be okay. Jill saved it. I mean, I was supposed to be having an amputee, have that leg off.
So what happened then, Jill? Because his other leg was in danger of coming off, but you said no.
We did. He has no feeling in his feet, so he damaged his foot. Infection was in because Joe admittedly is not the best at controlling his diabetes. He needed some good diabetes control. We needed to get rid of the gangrenous toe, which was holding infection in his foot. He needed blasting with some antibiotics, and he needed some hope. And it was worth a go, and limb salvage is always worth a go.
So Joe's not out of the woods yet?
Joe is always going to be high risk.
How many people like Joe are you seeing in his state or near his state, and is it on the increase?
Yes, we probably see, in Joe's state, we see a handful a week, but we're looking after 25 to 30 patients a day. Out there in community, there's a huge increase in referrals for diabetic foot problems.
How many people were you seeing a day like this 20 years ago?
When I started, I only did 2 clinics a week.
Really?
I'm now full-time.
Although 80% of all diabetes-related amputations are preventable, it's still estimated that 7,000 of them could take place next year. Unworryingly, even when a diabetes-damaged limb is amputated, the risks for patients remain high.
Okay. Patients who have their leg off have a very high risk of death compared with the rest of the population over the next 5 years. So, for example, it can be as high as 80% of them may not make it through for the next 5 years. Now, that's higher than, for example, colonic cancer, where it's 49%, and prostate cancer, where it's 20%, and breast cancer, where it's 16%.
All good reasons, of course, to try to reduce our risk of getting the disease. In our health checks of the people we assessed over 2 days, 40% had a family member with diabetes, and nearly 80% had waist sizes that increased their risk of getting type 2.
My risk was increased risk through lifestyle, so it's all stuff I can try and change.
It was an increased risk, or I wasn't surprised really. I know I need to lose a bit of weight myself, but it obviously improves. I need to do a bit more about it.
I'm also anxious to find out for sure if I have it, so I'm back to see Dr. Kanu Millie.
Jonathan Maitland.
650 of the patients at his practice have type 2 diabetes, a number that's on the up. Every week sees 2 or 3 new patients diagnosed. I just hope I'm not one of them. So there is a very simple, definitive test for diabetes, isn't there?
Yes, very quickly, 2 to 3 minutes, we should be able to find out what the chances are of you having diabetes. Okay, I will need a finger, please. Sorry. That's good enough.
This is a blood test, yeah?
This is a blood test. So sharp prick, as I say.
That wasn't too bad.
Okay.
Okay.
That's ready now.
2 minutes and 1 sore finger later, the results. Do I have diabetes? Okay, so give it to me straight, Doc.
All right, Johnny, do you want the good news or the good news?
Oh, I'll have the good news.
Well, the good news is the test that we did just now shows that you're not diabetic and your blood sugar levels were within the normal range.
Good, because I tell you what, I was really quite worried. I saw my aunt die last year and she was in a terrible state from diabetes-related conditions.
There is an increased risk in your case because of your family history and your age and a bit of timber around your waist. You could tip over. So we need to be careful and not complacent.
And complacency is the enemy when it comes to type 2 diabetes, because the consequences of it can be devastating, not just for the sufferer, but for the whole family. Elaine Clark's husband, John, died at the age of 51 after a 20-year struggle with the disease.
John, on first appearances, he would appear to be very good and have quite a healthy diet, but he did like a drink in the evening, he still smoked, he liked to take away, he was thirsty and going to the toilet a lot, but had absolutely no idea ourselves that it could be diabetes.
John was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes after suffering headaches and mood swings, but the family had no idea how serious things could get. John, who worked long, unsociable hours, would often skip meals and forget to take his insulin. It all came at a high price.
I think the biggest shock and turning point was in 2000 when John had a week off and he said his eyes were a bit blurry to go to the opticians, so we went and they did a check and sent us immediately to hospital, and within 3 months he was registered blind. We walked out that hospital on July the 4th, just tears streaming down our faces, not having a clue what to do. It was just going to change our life, and then we had to go home and explain to the kids what had happened, and we just all sat and cried.
Elaine became her husband's carer almost overnight.
He started having small strokes. I think he had 7 TIAs in the end. Then he had a big, major stroke. He also had a heart attack that we hadn't even realised. His kidneys were failing, and he went on to have a further stroke, and he got dementia as well. He eventually died of heart failure, but it was a matter of which organ was going to fail first. The thought of being a widow at 50 doesn't really enter your head when you're young. We'd been married for 29 years, and we were happy, we got on with everything, and you just think about life ahead, and it's not what you plan, and just because I didn't take it seriously in the beginning.
Elaine believes her family didn't get the support and education they needed when John was originally diagnosed. And she's not alone. It's reckoned that 24,000 diabetes-related deaths a year could be avoided with the right care and support.
Standards of diabetes care and the outcomes from those vary widely across the country by as much as 20-fold, depending on how effective local health services are. We think that's unacceptable. We think there needs to be a national coordinated process for making sure that those areas that provide poor care come up at least to the average, and that would make a huge difference.
Staying fit and healthy also makes a huge difference. Indeed, food can be especially important. Here at Newcastle University, researchers have shown that drastically reducing a person's fat levels by putting them on a low-calorie diet for just 8 weeks can actually reverse type 2 diabetes.
We discovered when we took people with type 2 diabetes who'd just had it for a short time, up to 4 years, and put them on a very low-calorie diet, just over 600 calories a day, the liver fat content fell down to equivalent non-diabetic within 7 days, and the insulin response of the liver was back to normal within 7 days. Now, that was a critical first step.
That's phenomenal, isn't it? That people can get rid of this really serious disease within days.
But that's just the initial bit. What we observed over the next 7 weeks was that the level of fat in the pancreas gradually went down and the pancreas woke up. Now, this is the absolutely magical bit, because doctors had believed that type 2 diabetes was inevitably progressive. It had to be a life sentence. You couldn't get away from it.
Will your idea work for everyone who's got type 2 diabetes?
That's what we really need to find out in this big study that's just starting. So it's important not to jump the gun with this.
53-year-old Alan Tutty took part in Professor Taylor's study. He was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes after a routine health check with his GP. After just 8 weeks on the low-calorie diet, his blood sugar levels returned to normal and his diabetes disappeared. Since then, he's kept the weight off and has remained diabetes-free by eating healthily and upping the exercise. I'm meeting him for a healthy lunch.
Oh, yeah.
There you are.
Bring it on.
I hope it's okay.
So how did you feel when you were diagnosed with type 2 diabetes?
Well, the first thing you think of is disbelief, really. It's, can this be happening to me? I just didn't feel fat at all. It didn't look fat. I think a lot of the fat that was causing the problem was actually internally.
So in very simple terms, you did a very low-calorie diet for 8 weeks, but what did it actually involve? What were you eating?
Having a liquid diet and non-starchy vegetables to the tune of 800 calories a day. People were just saying, that's very hard, and don't worry if you fail. But I was just determined that I wasn't going to fail.
But the bottom line is, it worked, and how? I mean, what happened? Tell me about it.
The programme consisted of me having an MRI scan just to check body fat, internal body fat, and my BMI at that point was something like 32, 33. When I came off that, it had gone down to 25, which is normal.
How much weight did you lose then?
I lost 2.5 stone between the 2nd of November and the 2nd of January.
And you went from being diabetic to non-diabetic?
Yes.
How did you feel about that?
I feel good. I do feel nice. This shirt, it fit like cling film, and I just cast it aside. It was really ready for the charity bag. But after I'd come off the low-calorie diet, I thought I'll give it one last chance, and really it just fits beautifully. It's just nice and slack.
But what worked for Alan won't necessarily work for everyone.
It will work for some people who've got discipline. It will not for others who fall off the wagon, I'm afraid. So it's not going to be the panacea, but it does certainly show that what is a very serious, very expensive condition, if caught early enough, can be reversed. And that's a really big breakthrough if we can make it happen in practice for a substantial number of people.
Type 2 diabetes may be known as the silent killer, but it needn't be, because it's entirely preventable if we take action early enough. In our health checks, 70% of people were at increased or moderate risk of getting type 2 diabetes, with 15% classed as high risk, giving them a 1 in 3 chance of getting it.
My father had diabetes as well, so I thought I was in quite a high risk category, but just the advice they gave me would hopefully keep me out of that and keep me in the clear.
Risk score was 36, which was high. So I had an idea it would be. So I've got to do something about that.
I tell you what surprises me about diabetes, and that's the fact that we don't seem to be taking it very seriously, even though it's one of our major health issues. I, however, am taking it seriously, hence my new manifesto of less cake and more gym, because at my age and my shape and with my family history, I can't afford not to.
To find out how you can get more information and support about type 2 diabetes, please go to our website at itv.com/tonight. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Have a good evening.
Next Tonight is back to Emmerdale, and Dom wants some answers while Sam continues with his plan. 8:30 it's Coronation Street, and Carla's turned to head for hospital in a troubled week on the cobbles. And then at 9, Life of Ryan, caretaker manager. We look at Ryan Giggs as he takes on a new role at Manchester United.